Craig Murray, if I can start with you. Is Britain anti-Semitic?
Well, the latest Pew Social Attitudes Survey of the European Union found that 7% of people in the United Kingdom have an unfavourable view of Jewish people, compared to 86% of people who have a favourable view. Now, obviously, 7% is far too many, but 19% had an unfavourable view of Muslims, and 42% had an unfavourable view of Roma or Gypsies. So, yes, sadly, of course, anti-Semitism exists, but fortunately, it's quite rare, and actually, the UK has less anti-Jewish attitudes than any other country surveyed in Europe.
Jake Wallis-Simons, anti-Semitism, we can go back to the pogroms of the Middle Ages, can't we? Anti-Semitism's always been there.
That's right, but I'm afraid that at the moment in the UK, anti-Semitism is being allowed to hide in plain sight, so long as it's been relabelled anti-Zionism. For too long, we've allowed hatred to flourish in this country, so long as it is directed at Israel. The level of vitriol and hatred directed at that country is out of all proportion. By way of comparison, if you think about China, the level of hatred in this country directed towards China, China has brutally occupied Tibet and is the execution capital of the world. The level of hatred towards Saudi Arabia, which chops off heads and hands regularly, or Iran, the theocracy Iran, or North Korea. By comparison, the level of hatred towards Israel is extreme in this country. Israel, a liberal democracy that protects the rights of gay people and women and minorities and so forth. And it's this, really, that we have to target. This is a manifestation of the oldest hatred of anti-Semitism, which has been rebranded for 2016 as anti-Zionism. And if I can, one quote that illustrates this, that I just jotted down this morning, is this. Israel, quote, claims tribal superiority over the entire rest of the world. That, I'm sure you'll agree, is an example of anti-Semitism masquerading as anti-Zionism, and the author of that quote is the man sitting in your Edinburgh studio right now, Craig Murray, who I think should respond to it.
Craig, did you hear that? Do you want to respond to it? It's not for me to agree with anything, but Craig Murray, direct question put to you. Did you hear it?
Yes, it's a complete and utter lie. I have never ever said anything vaguely like that.
You wrote it on your blog. You wrote it on your blog.
I have never ever said that.
You wrote it on your blog.
I did not write that on my blog.
I jotted it down this morning from your blog.
That is a lie. You are lying. You are lying.
Okay. I tell you what, I always get gentlemen. I get very nervous when we start talking about lying. It makes me twitch. So let's not. We're talking about quotes. Here's a quote, Mr. Murray.
May I reply? Because I've been accused of saying something I did not say. May I make perfectly plain that I deplore that last statement. I do not agree with it. I have not said it.
Let's move on. Let's move on. Gentlemen, I tell you what, we'll either move on or we'll draw a veil over this. Should we move on? Let me just bring in one of our tweets sent to me. I'll start quoting. This is Aliyah Tak, who says, quote, anti-Semitism is blossoming on the far left. All they have done is replace the word Jew with Zionist. Craig Murray, there is this view, isn't there, that on the far left there's been this elision of values. So you've got some people call it the Red-Green Alliance. This alliance, as it's perceived, between those on the hard left and those on the jihadist extremes who make common cause. They're not particularly comfortable bedfellows. So you have a situation, for instance, where a radical leftist feminist will sometimes literally sit next to a jihadist who, for instance, believes that women who are found to be unfaithful should have their hands lopped off, all the rest of it. That appears to be an emerging feature of the last 10 years. Would you agree with that, at least?
What I do think is happening is that people like myself who are critical of the state of Israel, which has, for example, in the last week demolished 12 more Palestinian homes on the West Bank in the Area C in order to make way for more illegal Israeli settlement on the West Bank. When we point out what is happening to the Palestinians, we are now accused quite falsely of anti-Semitism because there is a campaign to stop people fighting for the rights of Palestinians because they're terrified of this witch hunt that people like myself who fought racism my entire life come on the media and get accused of making anti-Semitic comments which we didn't make.
Yeah,
we really are in the middle of a very, very difficult witch hunt in the UK.
Jake Wallis-Simons, we mustn't have a situation, must we, where legitimate criticism of the state of Israel is out of bounds because people fear being stigmatised with that phrase, with that word, and anti-Semitism. That mustn't be allowed to happen in the interests of pluralism and democracy and free debate.
Well, that point is with respect, is just an attempt to throw dust in the eyes of common sense. Nobody's talking about criticism of Israel. I didn't say that criticism should be closed down. There's lots and lots of criticism that happens, believe me, within Israel itself. What I'm talking about is hatred, not criticism. And it's the level of hatred and vitriol directed towards Israel, beyond that that's directed towards any other country in the world, that needs to ring alarm bells, and that demonstrates that anti-Zionism is simply anti-Semitism 2.0, if you like. Mr. Murray, as you know, I looked at his blog earlier today.
Let's not go back to the blog.
Let's talk about anti-Zionism. He classes himself as an anti-Zionist, and I'm sure he'll admit to the fact that he doesn't think that Israel should exist or has a right to exist.
Well, hang on. That's quite a claim. That's quite. What does he think, Mr. Murray? Does Israel have a right? We're rather straying from our original question, which is about anti-Semitism. But on that specific point, is it your contention Israel has no right to exist?
My own view is that Israel is becoming an apartheid state, like South Africa was an apartheid state. I don't want it to exist in its present form. That does not mean I wish any harm to any person in Israel or wish anybody to be moved or ethnically cleansed or anything like that. I would like to see a different kind of state in Israel, that is true. That does not make me an anti-Semite.
Okay.
People are entitled to hold views about the state of Israel without being labelled as racist.
Craig Murray and Jake Wallis-Simons, thanks both for your contributions. Thanks a lot.